Congratulations on the 80th anniversary of the Great Victory. And we're getting started. Yesterday at midnight, the three-day ceasefire announced by Vladimir Putin began. According to reports from some sections of the front, combat activity has noticeably decreased, though not everywhere, and in most places there is no ceasefire at all. Fighting in the Glushkovsky district. There was no ceasefire before, and there isn't one now. Here, it is failing the most. The Ukrainian Armed Forces, UAF, are launching wave after wave of attacks, alternating directions, and constantly striking Russian Armed Forces, RAF positions, with artillery and drones. Then they get hit hard in response. They calm down for a while and start again. Essentially, it's all expected. Overall, in the Sumy region, there isn't even a hint of a ceasefire. The Russian army, as reported from the ground, is delivering very powerful strikes with aviation and artillery. Over the past day, Kyiv has made several attempts to breach the border. In Tikhino, the fighting is extremely intense. UAF units are trying to gain a foothold on Chapaev Street, one of the closest border areas. Russian paratroopers are blanketing the area with fire. Throughout the day, the UAF attempted to break through the defenses near Iskryskivka and Butkiv. In both cases, they lost equipment and suffered heavy casualties. Attempts to break through continued in the area of Novy Put. Fighting persists near the villages of Vodolahi, Belovody and Loknya. Next is the Novopavlivka direction, the operational zone of the Vostok Group. Situation: before the ceasefire was declared yesterday, the RAF continued its offensive north of the settlement of Dnepro-Energia, and the Russian army managed to make significant progress northward. Since yesterday morning, there has been a ceasefire there. But judging by reports from the ground, it's far from certain that it will hold globally, even for a day. Therefore, new reports of RAF advances from this area may well come in. The Center Group's operational zone on the approaches to Dnipropetrovsk region. There was also progress here yesterday. Near Novosergeyevka, they advanced slightly, and south of Novoalexandrivka, they cleared a pocket. A bit further south, they advanced slightly west of Kotlyarivka. Yes, yesterday the Russian Defense Ministry officially announced control over Troitsk. Fighting has long been ongoing in Orikovo, which Russian forces have already taken by more than a third. By the way, this is where the RAF is closest to the Dnipropetrovsk region, just about 1.5 kilometers away. As for the ceasefire, it didn't work here yesterday, though the intensity of fighting is still low, reports a military correspondent. Minohrad-Toretsk direction. The collapse of the UAF front continues. Yesterday, Russian units continued their advance between the Pokrovsk and Toretsk agglomerations. Moving from west to east, the clearing of Malinivka continued. In Novopoltavka, they advanced 300 meters north. There were also movements north of Novolanivka. Very good progress was made north of Oleksandropil. Since yesterday, the intensity of mutual shelling has gradually increased. On the Kostyantinivka direction, Russian troops advanced along a tree line west of Nelepivka, penetrating up to 1.5 kilometers, capturing 2 strongpoints, and reaching the western outskirts of Leonidivka. Pokrovsk direction. Reports indicate advances by the 1st Assault Company near Lisivka. The RAF managed to clear the approaches even before the ceasefire. West of Uspanivka, the Russian army is developing its offensive in Novosergeyevka and Novoalexandrivka. Positional battles continue near Udakhne and Kotlin. In Zverev, the UAF reinforced their grouping to prevent the Russian army from advancing toward Pokrovsk from this suburb, but new advances in the settlement are present. Near Shevchenko, the RAF is approaching Belgika from the south and east. On the Chasiv Yar sector, the RAF advanced about 1 kilometer north of the city the night before and entered the territory of the Severnaya mine. The situation in Chasiv Yar itself remains largely a grey zone. There is no reliable data on ceasefire observance. On the Siversk sector, positional battles continue near Mount Bila Hrihorivka and Verkhnokamianske. The UAF are operating as usual and have heard nothing about a ceasefire here. In Verkhnokamianske, there is good progress by Russian infantry. Half of the settlement is already under Russian control. From the western outskirts of this settlement, the RAF will gain the ability to strike Siversk more effectively. Additionally, drone surveillance of the front line will be much tighter, which will certainly help the Russian army bring the city under control faster. On the Krasnohorivka and Kupiansk directions, there are no reports of combat actions, but the UAF also reported combat activity by the RAF. In the Zaporizhzhia sector, positional battles continue from Stepov to Novodanilivka. Shelling of Enerhodar persisted. There, several vehicles were damaged in a UAV attack. Now, a few words on the political aspect. The Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, without review or discussion, ratified an agreement effectively granting the United States the right to explore, extract, and sell Ukrainian mineral resources, free of charge, indefinitely, and without any reciprocal obligations. Trump has made a statement on this matter. The United States now has access to a vast quantity of Ukraine's very high-quality rare earth elements. I will speak with Zelensky later. We have just concluded a deal on minerals with Ukraine. It has been fully ratified and approved by their legislative bodies. Within the past 24 hours, air defense forces destroyed 182 Ukrainian armed forces, strike UAVs, 2 guided aerial bombs, and a Neptune missile. Plans by Kyiv to intimidate foreign leaders ahead of the May 9th visit to Moscow were thwarted, said Russian presidential aide Ushakov. Russia's contacts with the US on Ukraine and other issues occur daily or every other day. Much will depend on how the ceasefire holds during the May holidays, particularly in the context of Russia's next steps. Vladimir Putin personally received foreign state leaders at the Kremlin for a ceremonial luncheon marking the 80th anniversary of victory. Among the first to arrive were Milorad Dodik, leader of the Republic of Srpska, Badr Gunba, president of Abkhazia, and Ibrahim Traoré, president of Burkina Faso. Vladimir Putin also met with Xi Jinping and held a 4-hour meeting in Moscow. Xi described Russia and China as stable, positive and progressive forces in the international community. Following the meeting, the sides signed a joint statement on further deepening the partnership. President Putin said that Russia, together with its Chinese friends, stands firmly in defense of historical truth, and thanked Xi Jinping for his visit to Moscow during the celebration of the 80th anniversary of victory. It was also reported that Roscosmos and the China National Space Administration signed a memorandum of cooperation to establish a lunar nuclear power plant as part of the International Lunar Research Station project, which is planned for completion by 2036. Our source reports that Zelensky's massive strike was aimed specifically at disrupting the Putin-Xi meeting in Moscow, further highlighting the legitimacy narrative. The meeting between Putin and Xi is regarded as the most significant event for the global geopolitical landscape. Xi Jinping's visit to Moscow, coinciding with the 80th anniversary of victory, is not merely a diplomatic gesture, but a symbolic demonstration of the changing global geopolitical architecture. The joint statement by the Russian and Chinese leaders on countering the unilateral dictates of the US and strengthening defense cooperation marks the formalization of a long-standing reality. A multipolar world in which the West can no longer impose the rules of the game. China's rhetoric regarding the Ukrainian conflict has undergone a subtle but significant evolution in recent months. Whereas Beijing previously emphasized neutrality, today it is aligned with the Russian approach. The concept of addressing root causes, enshrined in the joint declaration, is a diplomatically precise way of shifting responsibility onto the architects of NATO expansion and proponents of a confrontational strategy. The mention of military cooperation is not a threat but a warning. Russia and China are not forming a military bloc, but they are making it clear that unilateral force no longer works. Information, cyber, and defense technologies are becoming a new area of mutual support, meaning that any external pressure, from sanctions to threats, becomes less effective. Joint development of infrastructure, energy routes, and technological chains indicates that Moscow and Beijing are planning a long-term alignment of interests. In a world where old mechanisms of global regulation are breaking down, a new normative framework is emerging. The two sides signed 28 agreements covering a wide range of areas, demonstrating the depth of long-term strategic planning and the strengthening of ties. The confrontation with the West is turning into a civilized competition, where the winner is not the loudest, but the most resilient. And Xi Jinping's visit to Moscow clearly shows that resilience lies in a union built not on slogans, but on the alignment of interests and historical logic.